allowing our mind to be intoxicated really with any substance that puts our rational thinking out of commission, that influences our decision making, is extremely dangerous. And a lot of sin are involved and follow intoxication through alcohol and other substances. And I could tell you story after story and warning after warning from that, from my own life and many other people. I mean, it's unbelievable. I did not believe it until I've experienced it myself, and realized how foolish you can become as soon as you become under the influence and of these intoxicating substances. Anyways, while he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple, which was in Jerusalem, that the kings and his princes, his wives and his concubines might drink therein. Now that was a foolish thing to do. He should have known better after the lessons that Nebuchadnezzar learned previously. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives and his concubines, drank in them. They drank wine and praised the the gods of gold. Big difference. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. So those dumb, foolish idols they were worshiping, with what really belonged to the living God, the Lord Jehovah. Verse 5, in the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and rode over against the candlestick upon the plaister of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that rode. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. I don't know if maybe as a young person I used to love reading these comic books, and I'm not necessarily recommending reading all of those things these days, but at the time I didn't know much better, and some of the comics books I really loved. The painter of one of the common themes he had, that when people were afraid, their knees would clatter together and shake together, and that is the kind of picture I have in my mind here with this king who was really leading a world empire. Let's drop down to verse 23 in Daniel chapter 5. Daniel chapter 5, verse 23. But thou hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords and thy wives and thy concubines have drunk wine in them. And thou hast praised the gods of silver and of gold, of brass, iron, wood, and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know. And the God in whose hand thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified. And that reminds us, of course, of Romans chapter 1 and 2. Verse 24, then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written. And this is the writing that was written, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. This is the interpretation of the thing, meaning God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting. Peres, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. In that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain, and Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. And so this is the fall of King Belshazzar there. And it's stunning to me. Here Daniel prophesies to him and says, hey, your kingdom is about to be taken away. You've been found wanting by the Most High God. And he's like, well, thank you. Appreciate you finally revealing this message to me. Here's gifts and a position. Like, no consequences, no thinking, okay, what does this mean? Is this really going to happen? What should I do about it? No. Hey, wonderful. Good enough. Let's keep partying. Wow. And that very same night, he loses his life and his kingdom. And so God knows how to obey those that walk in pride. Amen. Now, before we close together today, I just quickly want to mention one more thing. And all of these things really are all connected. We've mentioned God's sovereignty. We've mentioned how God knows how to deal with the pride of man, which, pride really comes down to us testing and provoking and basically checking out God's sovereignty and rebelling against it. And so God knows how to abase that pride of man and humble us. But not just that, we also learned from the book of Daniel how God, fourthly, blesses those that trust in Him and those that fight in prayer. And so there's several different aspects of that, and we won't be able to mention all of that now. But God blesses those that trust in Him and those that are praying warriors for Him. And I once again want to go back there for an illustration of that in the book of Daniel into chapter 1. And just quickly read a few verses here. Daniel chapter 1. We see how Daniel and his friends have determined to keep the laws of Moses, which were the commandments of God given to the Jews during that time period. And so there in verse 3, we read, "And the king spake unto Esphanas, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princes, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored, and skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge, and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, in whom they might teach the learning in the tongue of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat, and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. Now among those were of the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah." But as we drop down to verse 8, we see though Daniel taking a stand. Dare to take a stand, dare to take a stand, dare to stand like Daniel. Amen? A little song in Sunday school goes something like that. And that's what we see happening there in verse 8. "But Daniel purposed in his heart." Notice, all of our decisions and thoughts, that's where they originate from. Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. As we drop down to verse 12, we continue to see the respectful way Daniel approached his superior, the authority over the eunuchs. Now that man was really a sinner. He was a heathen person. He obviously had no trouble with serving those idols. He was a servant of a wicked king, and nevertheless, Daniel approached that person of authority respectfully, properly. And what wisdom he shows through that. Verse 12. "Prove thy servants," interesting how he terms that, "prove thy servants, I beseech thee." So he's not saying, well, you better do what we ask, or you know what, we're just going to go on a hunger strike, and you're going to get killed for that. No, they says, hey, we want to serve you and do, and submit to you, and I'm begging you, please, I beseech thee. "Prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. Then let our countenance be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat. And notice this, and as thou seest, deal with thy servants. As thou seest, deal with thy servants." So he not only has the wisdom to approach his authority respectfully and properly, and ask properly, he also left the decision ultimately up to his superior, to his authority. And once again, how we already can see the wisdom of Daniel. And not just that, then we don't need to be surprised that obviously he found favor and tender love with that superior of his, in the eyes of that superior of his. Amen. And obviously his authorities enjoyed and loved doing favors to somebody that submitted to them and approached them in such a respectful manner. And we find then that he, verse 14, consented to them in this manner and proved them 10 days. Verse 15, and at the end of the 10 days, their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. In other words, their poult's diet was healthier for them, and God blessed their obedience. Thus, Melzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine that they should drink and gave them poles. And as I was thinking about Daniel's stand here and how God blessed him when Daniel trusted God and chose to rather obey God than the commandments of man, I was thinking of this old song, this old hymn that I want to close with for us today, and that is the hymn called Loyalty to Christ. That is what I think Daniel is a passionate, a powerful example of, and a lesson, an illustration for us even during these days. Not everything in Daniel's life was rosy. Daniel's situation and circumstances were anything else but favorable. And yet, he sought God's wisdom. He submitted to God. He had determined and purpose in his heart to obey God no matter what and trust the Lord, the sovereign of the universe. And you know what? God blessed that. And he had determined to be loyal to God and loyal to Christ. The song says, from over hill and plain, there comes the signal strain. 'Tis loyalty, loyalty, loyalty to Christ. Its music rolls along. The hills take up the song of loyalty. Yes, loyalty to Christ. The refrain says, on to victory, on to victory. They that know their God shall do exploits. Amen. Christ, our great commander on, will move at his command, will soon possess the land. You know, that's not referring to an actual country. That is referring back to that picture of victory that comes when we've fulfilled God's will for our life. True loyalty, yes, loyalty to Christ. Amen? So that's what, that encouragement I want to leave us with together this day. And I trust that you'll be able to tune in together and meet with us at the church at 7 p.m. Tomorrow on Thursday for a Bible study and prayer. And if you're not able to do that safely, please make sure to at least tune into the live streaming online and fellowship together that way. And I love you folks. I'm praying for you, and God bless you.